The distress came in as a polite chirp behind the heater's rattle. Our base runs an old repeater that makes everything sound smaller than it is, like bad news told through mittened hands. On the bench, I had the avalanche probe laid out next to the snow saw and a coil of accessory cord. We were inventorying for the week when the beacon decided our plan should change. ID 7C2, duty cycle 3 seconds, Melina said, leaning over the receiver with a pencil. She wrote the timings in the margin of yesterday's sled log. Week could be a ghost. Ghosts don't repeat on schedule, I said. I thumbed the sat phone awake, watching bars appear and disappear as the heater coughed. Any match on tourist hire lists? Nothing filed, she said. Could be locals, could be a hunter, could be a logging crew. The Siberian wilderness does scale like a planet and detail like a machine shop. In midwinter, the air has teeth, but also rules. Batteries sulk, plastics lie about their flexibility, sound travels too far, and then not at all. We work inside those rules. I signed the sled out in the log, added the flare kit and a second mylar bivy, and strapped the probe to the left rail where my hand would find it without looking. Our snow machines live in a lean-to that doesn't bother to keep out all the cold. We call them by their noises. Mine is bare, low, patient, a little offended by poor throttle manners. I ran the checklist aloud because habits survive weather, where people don't. Fuel 90%, belt tension nominal, skis greased, runner bolts seated, tool roll present, first aid present, flares red, 3, orange smoke, 2, mylar bivy, 2, stove and canister, 1, sat phone 1, battery sled heat on. Melina's machine, Fox, answered with a clean idle. We killed the heater, pulled balaclavas up, and let the door slap us into the blue. The cold had that clean metal smell, like a new coin, cut with the resin of the shed timbers. Overhead, the clouds spread thin enough to pretend it's sun. We rode out on the logging track, skis hissing on wind-packed sastrugi. The GPS told its version of the world, and we agreed for now. The beacon came in on the 3-second beat, polite as a metronome. I kept my eyes in a triangle, trail, horizon, instruments. We'd tuned the route to keep clear of the wind scours and the convexities that like to fail quietly. A kilometer out, the land stopped pretending to be polite and became itself. Birch stands combed by wind, the long white of frozen swales, the dark seam where a creek refused to freeze flat. At kilometer 4, I signaled a pause. We killed the engines, and the quiet made a shape. Somewhere out there, a woodpecker auditioned for spring. The beacon's timing said 3 seconds, 3 seconds, 3 seconds. But the third interval stretched to 4, then returned to 3. I made a mark in my notebook and didn't say why. Range? Melina asked. If it's line of sight and honest, 4 to 5 kilometers, I said. I pulled the sat phone's stubby antenna forward and called dispatch. The wind licked my words thin. Dispatch, SAR-1, we have ID 7C2 repeating, bearing 088, moving to Ridge 1 to establish radio window. ETA 30. Copy, SAR-1, no filed missing persons. Weather window holds until 1600. Sunset 1740. Keep the 10-minute radio check. We rode again, threading between witch-broomed birch and hard drifts like poured concrete. Every few minutes the beacon would step wrong, like a dancer who learned the sequence but not the music. I told myself it was reflection off the ridge or a timing oscillator that hated the cold. Machines are allowed to be imperfect. Pattern trumps anecdote, until it doesn't. The ridge wasn't much, just a polite uplift with a view, but it broke the wind and let us look at the world as more than a corridor. We parked the machines in the lee and buried the skis to keep them from wandering when the gusts found their second courage. I pulled the avalanche probe and assembled it by feel, thin gloves on, each section locking with the quiet click of good design. From the ridge, the snow told a digest version of the morning. 2 fox loops, tight and undecided. A larger set of tracks that the wind had tried to forget. At first glance, they read as a person in snowshoes, oval punch, consistent stride. But the planform was wrong. The ovals pinched at the rear and were a shade too long. The toe marks showed barely any drag, even where the crust had a habit of catching. I kept that to myself for a page and a half and wrote only, tracks trending east, likely one person, older than 2 hours. Melina stood with the receiver and swung its small Yagi antenna like a conductor. Stronger, she said, but the timing's breathing. Multipath, I said. Ridge bounce. The right words are anchors even when you're not sure they're attached to anything. We opened a 10-minute radio window and called. Nothing back but the soft gold clack of a repeater in the distance and a hiss that didn't belong to this frequency. I logged it. Radio window 10, static hiccup, at TP2 13, 3 bursts at roughly 2 Hz. I've learned to love the boring lines in the notebook, because the odd ones need a place to sit. We ate standing up, nuts gone brittle with cold, chocolate that fought bite marks, a sip of tea that steamed the inside of my mask and froze it an instant later. The smell now was fuel and wool. Under my boots, the snow felt wrong for this temperature, a tightness like glass, yet each pole plant came back soft, as if there were a hollow note somewhere in the layer cake. I want to look at those tracks, I said. If they're snowshoes, we might get an idea of pace and heading. If they're not, we should know why. We worked down toward the lee edge, cautious on the slope. My probe found density changes like book spines, crust, wind slab, then a sugar layer that whispered bad ideas. I flagged our up track with bamboo markers so we could leave exactly by our own handwriting later. The tracks resolved from a guess to a fact. Ovals, long, pinched at the back, heel imprint barely a rumor. The stride length suggested someone tall or someone not carrying much. The tailings, the little sprays of snow that even neat snowshoes leave, were absent where I expected them and present where the wind should have cleaned them. I put my hand in one and felt the oddest thing. The snow was colder than the air above it by more than the usual. My glove prickled with that brittle cold sting, while my face, exposed at the cheekbones, felt only the calm bite of midwinter. Temperature pockets happen near creek beds, near vents, near nothing at all. I logged it, drew a small diagram that looked like a child's shoe, and underlined nothing. 2 hours old? Melina asked. Could be less. The drift tells stories, then lies. I glanced at the GPS and frowned. Our breadcrumb track, neat when we came up, had shifted 2 meters to the north on the display while our machine sat perfectly still above our own ski scars. It happens. Satellites wander on paper, but the beacon's bearing ticked half a degree at the same moment, then ticked back. I didn't like that they danced together. Let's push to the creek seam, I said. We can find cover for a call. We followed the track line, machines idling behind us in their dug-in cradles. The creek seam was a dark ribbon that cut the white and made its own weather. Snow piled along its banks like fat cuffs. We found a spot where the willow scrub bent the wind into a tolerable hiss and opened another radio window. SAR-1 to any unit on this frequency. If you're transmitting beacon ID 7C2, tap your transmitter twice on receipt. We waited. The creek answered with a wooden sound down in its throat. Then, in the headset, not a tap, but something like 2 short hisses again near 2 Hz, not at our cadence. I could have filed it under repeater glitch. I could have said the word inversion and felt clever. Melina looked at me over the rim of her mask. She has a way of keeping her eyes calm that makes you listen harder. Orders say chase the beacon, she said softly, not the noise. We chase the beacon, I agreed. We also write down the noise. We set a bearing east by southeast, favoring terrain that wouldn't insult the snowpack. The sky lost definition. The light and the ground held a quiet argument over which was which. I watched the cornices on the minor rolls, looking for that tension line that means the hill is thinking. We skirted one that had the wrong sparkle to it, where frost feathers lay on a slab like confetti on ice. The beacon grew stronger and then didn't, as if walking away and toward us between sentences. Our speed kept honest by the willows. We rode in short hops and checked the machines after each, my hand to Bear's body for that specific warmth that means the sled is fine, and the bite that means you're burning fuel too fast because the air is so cold, your mixture thinks it's still summer. The smell now was a thread of hot plastic from somewhere it shouldn't be hot. I put my hand along the sat phone's battery sled and felt nothing wrong. I put it along the receiver's case and felt a pulse, not electrical, but a tremor, a very small stuck motor hum that faded when I told myself it did. We came up under a stand of spruce that had made their own amphitheater out of snow. In the hush, a sound motif returned, a delayed echo after our own movements, a half-second behind, like we lived under a soft dome. I threw a snowball to hear it. It landed, thumped, and a breath later the thump came back with its edges shaved. Wind trick, ridge, sometimes you test a thing and decide to add it to a page instead of your mouth. We cut engines. The world's quiet revealed the far hum of weather building a country away. The beacon repeated 3 seconds, and again, and again. I looked back at our machines to check the drift, and for a second the ridge we'd come from took a small, unkind step to the right, no more than a glance's worth, and then was where it had always been. My jaw tightened inside the mask. Spatial drift lives in the eyes when the sky has no shadows. It also lives in instruments when the instruments are tired of being true. Set the next check for 10 minutes, I said. Radio window at the top of the gully, then we choose. Choose what? Whether orders or the hill gets to write the afternoon. I kept it light, the way you do when you want someone to know you're paying attention, without telling them to be afraid. We packed the antenna, snapped the probe back to my rail, and moved toward the gully. Behind us, our ski scars began to soften under a wind that had been sleeping and now wished to talk. We took the gully in a herringbone, skis angled, machines idling behind like patient animals kept on short leads. The light turned indecisive, and the wind found its old voice, coming up the draw in sentences. I kept the probe in my near hand like a walking stick and felt for the layer that didn't love us. The snow had that brittle sugar slide under the top, not yet a trap, but thinking about it. The 3-second beacon tapped on as if it had been told to teach children to count. I marked each pulse with the pencil end against my mitt, a habit that turns time into something you can fold and put in a pocket. At the lip of the gully we stopped. Fox and Bear's skis were already feathering in spindrift. The blue-gray kind that looks gentle until it fills your plans one grain at a time. Window at 10, Melina said, raising her wrist. We'd synced watches before we left the shed and promised to respect them even when the sky started lying. Copy, I said. We make our own good radio. I lifted the little Yagi, plugged the receiver, and tested the sat phone's battery. Still honest. I breathed through my mask and named what I could smell. Fuel, wool, the faint wood sour of the creek back there. Nothing else. The wrong smell for this weather would have been fish, or ozone, or the burnt plastic thread that had teased me earlier. I didn't name those out loud, just left them in the air for the wind to take if it wanted. The tracks cut across our slope line, messy in the spindrift, then abruptly neat where the wind couldn't reach. Oval, long, pinched at the rear. I tried to convince them to be snowshoes made by a practical person with a too long frame. The tailings were still wrong, the toe pickup too clean. On a short flat I knelt and pressed my glove into a fresh depression the wind had half filled. The snow at the bottom read strangely dry, as if it hadn't been kissed by the same air. My fingers prickled, then dulled. I pulled back before I had to pretend that didn't bother me. Stride is stretching, Melina said, measuring with her pole. Faster here, then shorter again. Someone learning the terrain, I said. Or someone who doesn't get tired the way we do. I erased the last clause in my head and replaced it with wind on the flats, fatigue on the rises. We stepped our machines over a roll, engines quiet, and the delayed echo found us again. Our own sounds coming home with the corners rounded, a half-second late. The gully's walls weren't high enough for that, not with wind putting teeth on the edges. I pocketed the data. Sound motif recurring, delay roughly constant, unaffected by terrain change, small to small. If you write it clean, your brain gets less room to invent. At T+0940, we staged for the call. We set the antenna in a tripod we carry for the purpose. 3 shock cord legs, a small plate with holes that our mitts know by heart. I pushed the probe into the snow to anchor the base and looped a guy line to a buried ski. We do small things right, so the big things don't get veto power. Ready, Melina said. Her breath ghosted the inside of her shell hood, then vanished. Say R1, I said into the mic. Opening radio window 10 from ridge gully position. Bearing to beacon 081, signal variable. Any unit. If you have eyes or ears on 7C2, break and transmit. There's an honest quiet that radios make when nobody answers. It has a grain to it. What came back had that grain, plus a beat that wasn't our world. Hiss, hiss, a hair under 2 per second, then clean silence. I'd logged the same cadence at the creek. Now it arrived wearing a stronger coat. You hear it, Melina said, not asking. I hear it, I said. We're not changing the plan. I let my voice do the work of conviction and left my gut to argue with itself later. Mark the bearings of the last 2 strong pulses. She swung the antenna slow and careful. 081, she said. Then a breath later, 079, then back. Her pencil wrote numbers that didn't blink. Multipath, I said again, because the right label is a winter blanket. Still, that small dance with our GPS drift back on the ridge lived near the front of my head. Instruments like to agree when they're telling you comfortable things. When they refuse and the news is mild, that's when you pay attention. We let the window run its 10 and closed it neat. The wind had filled our inbound ski marks up to the bamboo flags. We resighted the last two we'd placed and set a short hop route along the gully's shadow side, where the slab looked least interested in conversation. I tightened my goggles and felt the strap bite a little too hard behind my ear. Small discomforts register when the big ones are still deciding their schedule. We moved in low gears, each hop no longer than 2 minutes of running time, then a check, then another 2. The beacon grew demonstrably stronger once, then stepped back like we'd offended it by looking. I timed the pulses on a new page. At minute 4, one interval stretched to 4 seconds and stayed there for 3 beats before returning to 3. A person in trouble sometimes jiggles the unit, or the battery gets cold enough to sulk, or the antenna makes a better deal with the sky. Machines admit mistakes without embarrassment, but the change had a rhythm to it that felt like listening rather than failure. Halfway along the gully, the tracks left us, cutting up and out into a bowl where the wind wrote all the headlines. We followed long enough to see their habit. Each step landed, pressed, then released without the side scrape snowshoes usually leave when the crust is thin. The tailings appeared on the windward side twice where I would have bet they'd choose Lee. I laid the probe across one and saw the sifting spindrift reverse course for a breath and climb the shaft like a slow spill backwards. Static play, I told myself. Dry air does tricks. Hold, I said. And we did, letting the soundscape settle. The echo delay stayed faithful. A spruce branch clicked, wood talking to cold, and downslope something hollow boomed under snow as the wind changed, a distant cornice complaining. No whump under our feet, no marching cracks, just the ordinary sermons of winter. My shoulders lowered a fraction. We angled to a copse just big enough to hide in, killed the machines, and ate another standing meal. I made myself chew each bite until it became acceptable, not because the food deserved it, but because routines bind you to your best self when the map starts to misbehave. I checked Bear's belt with a gloved fingertip and the ski bolts with a thumb. Each fastener reported what fasteners like to report. Not today. Fuel math? Melina asked. Conservative rectangle says we have a clean out and back with 20 minutes contingency, I said. If we choose the longer arc to stay out of the bowls, we buy safety with evening. I drew rectangles on the page and let the pencil decide which looked kinder. Orders? She said, meaning the official plan that sits inside the sat phone like a quiet roommate. Chase the beacon, keep the windows, hold the weather line, I recited, and come home with all the bones we left with. She nodded. I know what her nods mean. Measured agreement, tempered by the precise inventory of what we can't control. We kicked our way back onto the line and climbed from the copse into open country. The sky had quit pretending it's sun. Flat light braided with spindrift makes small slopes grow teeth, and big slopes go featureless. I glanced at our breadcrumb trail on the GPS and watched it wobble north again by a meter, then retrieve itself like a dog who remembered its name. At the same moment, the beacon's bearing took the same fraction step, then returned. The two movements had no requirement to be friends, and yet, I wrote it without declaring it. Another window in 10, I said, on the shoulder where the bowl breaks. She held up the 10 fingers she was keeping warm in her mitts. Make it 9, she said. Wind's building a thought. At the shoulder, the tracks sharpened. Here, the spindrift couldn't quite commit. I crouched and measured stride with the probe. From tread to tread, it expanded again, then pulled close as if whoever made them had shortened leg by leg to pass a place we couldn't yet see. I took one step to the side, and the snow underneath read hollow to my pole, then dense, then hollow again as if the hill had been laminated by an impatient hand. I marked the spot with a ribbon, and we gave it an extra meter of respect. 2 minutes to window, Melina said. We staged the antenna, guided in a triangle, checked the sat phone's bars and the receiver's battery sled. I ran a glove over the case. There it was again, the faintest tremor, like a stuck motor unsticking, present only if you thought of it first. I set the unit down and steadied my breath. You can let your heart teach the instrument what to say if you're not careful. Radio window 10, I called. SAR1, shoulder position, bearing to 7C2 now, 078, signal variable, any unit, if you can hear us, tap twice or key your mic twice. The hiss came back closer and cleaner and exactly wrong. 2 soft bursts at around 2 hertz, then 3 as if an echo remembered to count. I kept my face neutral behind the mask and looked past Melina at the far shoulder. On that shoulder, the spindrift flowed in 2 directions at once for a breath, then chose a single stream like a crowd remembering which door leads out. In the receiver's background, a new thing whispered, quiet, like wire under snow taught to sing by wind. It skated along 3 keys in a way my ear knows from city transformers and summer crickets, neither of which belonged here. I wrote, hydrophonic hiss, then scolded myself and crossed it out. The word had arrived from the wrong story. The beacon pulsed 3, 3, 3, then 4, then 3. The yo-yo of our bearings matched that tiny northward wobble on the GPS, like 2 clocks agreeing to be late in different rooms. If the ridge had moved earlier, this was its quieter cousin, papers shuffled on a desk you can't see. Decision point, I said. The wind carried our voices away and left only the shapes. We keep the rectangle, Melina said, firm, before I could offer a braver or dumber line. We stay on ground that's thinking slow, not fast. Copy, I said, grateful for the way our partnership balances my curiosity with her arithmetic. We push the next leg to the larch stand, set window 11 there, and if the beacon behaves, we bend the corner. I stowed the antenna, folded the tripod, clipped the probe back to my rail. We brushed spindrift off the machines and eased onto the shoulder in low throttle. Somewhere a spruce chattered in complaint. We aimed for the larch, a dark comma against the gray, and kept the slope out of our blind side. Behind us, our track softened again as if the hill had been waiting to own the story. Ahead, the long white settled into a hum that wasn't quite weather and wasn't quite our engines. The beacon's timing tapped its small drum, and somewhere out there a person, or not a person, kept to a pace we could almost meet. We rode until the larch stood close enough to count its dead candles, and I felt the afternoon make its quiet turn toward shorter options. We had fuel for honesty and a sky for arithmetic, a mission that fit inside rules, and an asterisk that did not. Window 11 and 5, Melina said. We'll keep it clean, I said, and meant both the log and whatever we were about to put our names on. We made the larch stand by keeping the bowl on our polite side and the spindrift in our faces. The trees had grown in a shallow star, each trunk shouldered by a wind-carved dune of snow. We put the machines Bear and Fox, nose to the lee, and kicked down to the needles until we hit the older frost that keeps anchors honest. I set the probe like a flag at our up track and stacked 3 bamboo wands in a triangle around the machines. In weather that wants to take your steps back, you owe your future self breadcrumbs you can find at dusk. Window opens in 4, Melina said, eyeing her watch. We use a 10-minute radio window every hour whether the sky is kind or not. Protocol turns luck into a smaller variable. She took off a mitten, turned her wrist, and snapped the mitten back on before the cold could write its own note. Tripod, I said. We have a choreography for this. She clears the snow to hardpack with the shovel. I seat the plate and run the guy line. She assembles the little Yagi and sets the elevation. I check the sat phone, then the receiver battery, and the tiny gain knob that hates gloves. The motions keep us from thinking too hard about the odd cadence that had crept into our channels. When the world starts to invent rhythms, you drown them in checklists. I thumbed the sat phone awake. Bars flickered, then held. Dispatch's number sat at the top of the log like a promise. I kept the flare kit where my left hand would find it without looking, and I tugged the mylar bivy free of its pouch until it showed a corner. You never need it until you do, and then the pouch becomes a puzzle box. The smell here was resin and wool, and the flat metal chill the wind leaves on your teeth. No thread of burnt plastic, no whetstone scent to say thaw, none of the fishy breath that sometimes comes when a creek is thinking of changing its mind. The cold carried sound without generosity. You got what you made yourself, then the wind took its share. On my mark, I said. We open and log, then we go quiet and listen. Copy, she said. At Teepskull, I keyed the mic. Dispatch, SAR-1 at Larch Stand. Opening radio window 10. Beacon 7C2 bearing 076, signal variable. Weather stable, wind 20 sustained, gusts 25. 2 personnel, 2 machines, fuel sufficient for planned rectangle. Over. The pause came back with its usual texture, then resolved into dispatch's clipped calm. SAR-1, copy all, no matches on 7C2. Nearest crews remain green, no other beacons in region. Maintain schedule. Report any human voice intercepts immediately. Copy. Any anomalies we should know? The dispatcher added, like a person asking about rain to be polite. I looked at Melina. She was already writing. Bearing, bars, time, wind. Her pencil didn't bother with feelings. I heard my own breath in the mask and counted 3 heartbeats before I answered. Minor multipath on bearing swings, I said. Receiver picked faint hiss bursts earlier at approximately 2 hertz. Unknown source. Noting but not waiting. Continuing to beacon. Static acknowledged me in a way that could have been a sigh if radios had lungs. Understood. Keep your 10-minute windows. Weather line advances at 1600. Dispatch out. We went to listen. I turned down the receiver gain until snow against our sleeves sounded like someone writing on paper. The beacon tapped its 3-second drum. 3, 3, 3. And then, like a child who had been told not to, stretched 1 to 4. The next 3 were on time again. Somewhere above us, the spindrift hissed against larch bark in a ropey, additive way. The hiss doubled for a breath, like 2 streams crossing, then braided back into one. The echo delay, our now familiar half-second shadow, came home to us after each shift, unchanged by the trees. There, Melina said, tilting her head. Not a question. She hears patterns the way I read snow. I've got it, I said. We made a small ledger, time index, interval length, bearing at each interval measured in 5-degree swings of the Yagi. When the pulses were on 3 seconds, the bearing sat at 076. On the 4-second pulses, it wandered to 078 and back. That matched the nonsense wobble we'd seen on the GPS up on the shoulder. Tiny, useless except for the way it refused to be random. Instruments will cough together when they share a problem. These belong to different families. Could be low satellite angle, I said. Could be oscillator angry at the cold. Could be winter arithmetic. Could be, she said, not rescuing me. Mine at 6 of the window brought 2 light hisses in the audio bed, a breath under 2 per second, like 2 soft exhalations through cloth. They arrived early in the minute and did not recur. I didn't key the mic. I drew a tiny square on the page at their time and wrote nothing inside it. Fuel, Melina said when we closed the window at exactly 10. I love the relief of a routine completed, the way the box around the notebook line makes the brain feel larger inside the helmet. Fuel math still good, I said. Rectangle with a bend toward the east tree line buys us 15 minutes of safety and 5 of evidence. We keep the ridge's leeward side and stay off the convexities. If the beacon drifts north more than 2 degrees, we revisit. Copy the bend, she said. She's the best kind of second. Not a shadow, but an angle the world has to honor. We stowed the tripod and lashed the Yagi to the sled. I smoothed the area with the shovel, erasing our little radio camp so the wind wouldn't make new opinions out of our holes. Bear started clean. Fox answered without complaint. I let the machines rumble a minute while I walked a circle with the probe, listening through my hand for the feel that says the crust wants to talk. It didn't yet. We took the line into open ground. The light went flatter. The horizon quit speaking as a line and became a band. When terrain erases itself, your head starts drawing shapes to stay busy. I pinned my eyes to 3 fixed points at a time, flag, larch cluster, a dark seam, and forced the brain back to the map. We found the tracks again where the wind had been unsure. The ovals still refused to read as a good snowshoe. Here, the stride shortened sharply, not for slope, but for something else. 2 steps roomed closer together, then a longer one, then a side set that left no side scrape. I laid the probe along the prints and measured. Short, short, long, I said, like stepping over something. What's something? Melina asked. Could be a hidden branch, I said. I gently probed where the long step had landed. Under 15 centimeters of chalky drift, there was air. An old willow bent and buried, a pocket I wouldn't have put a boot through. The hill had laminated it over like a secret, not a trap, yet. Good step, I said to whoever had put it there before us. We shaped our rectangle a little wider to keep others' good steps intact. The beacon obliged with strength and then reticence, like a witness learning if speaking helps. Twice it settled into 4-second intervals for a whole minute, then rebuked itself back to 3 as if it had been corrected. I checked my watch against Melina's. Perfect sync. I checked the sat phone's clock against both. A second fast. I let the second be. At the rectangle's top right, the wind drew a visible line across the snow, a silver snake that marked where the packed surface became new, loose spicules. We do not cross those lightly. I kicked a pit with my boot, cut a small square with the saw, and let the block tell us its story. A fist-hard wind slab over sugar, the interface clean and silty. I pressed with my glove and the block sheared with a letter opener sigh. We set a new line that bought us 40 meters at the cost of 5 minutes. Safety and afternoon live on opposite ends of a small rope. Window in 20, Melina said. Let's earn it, I answered. The rectangle's long side brought us near a low ridge that wasn't much more than a thought. We kept it to our right, just outside a polite zone where wind had made the crust shine wrong. The echo delay followed, patient and unchanged. The GPS crumb trail developed its small north wobbles at the same instance the beacon bearing made its shy 2-degree bow. I wrote without naming the friendship. If you call a pattern too early, you make it your partner, and partners ask for favors. At the far corner, we idled the machines in the lee of a drift and opened the window again. Dispatch, SAR-1, window 10, beacon 7C2 now 074, signal stronger, interval intermittently 4 seconds. Continuing along planned rectangle with minor weather-driven offsets. Dispatch read it back with a new line about the weather line stepping half an hour quicker. That moves all your sums. Copy, I said. We'll compress our return leg if we have to. 2 more windows before turn home. We closed down to listen. The hiss bursts did not return. Instead, a new thing arrived on the edge of hearing. A wire song at around 3 key, faint as a coin spinning on cloth, there for 3 heartbeats, then gone. Trees can make wires out of themselves when wind teaches them a tune. These larches were too far apart to duet. Do we bend toward that? Melina asked, meaning the stronger signal. Not yet, I said. We keep the rectangle until we earn the right to do something smarter. We rode the last leg toward a shallow saddle we'd picked on the map. The wind turned a degree, and the spindrift along the ridgeline did a small, theatrical shoulder shrug, as if the hill had reset its coat. I looked up, blinked against the flat light, and for a half-breath the saddle slid left by the width of a tree trunk, and then eased back to where the contour said it lived. I stopped the machine without a word, and let my eyes reset on 3 new anchors, a black stub, a wind lip, Melina's shoulder. The world sat still again, chastened or amused. Light trick, I said, because there's value in keeping your nouns comforting. Trick noted, she said, and tapped the GPS screen. Our crumb line had done the same 2-meter north step at the exact breath. The beacon's bearing had tugged with it, polite and small. We reached the saddle and dug the machines in again. I set the probe like a camp standard and looped a guy line to Bear's ski. When I touched the sat phone battery sled, I felt, faintly, that tremor I'd known at the creek, a stuck motor hum in miniature. I lifted my hand and it vanished like I'd imagined it. I set my palm again and the hum did not return. You can become your own multipath if you let your pulse into the gear. Window opens in 2, Melina said. Her eyes were calm in the goggle glass. Calm doesn't mean easy. Then we choose our bend, I said. Orders say chase the beacon. The hill says pay cash. We watched the second hand do its neat work. The wind wrote temporary sentences in the saddle. The beacon tapped its drum. The day narrowed by the width of a shadow we hadn't earned yet. I laid the flare kit out of its pocket and set it where my hand could find it without looking. SAR 1, I keyed. Window 10, saddle position. And the ridge ahead, the slight thought of it, lowered itself a hand's width and stood up again, like a sleeping chest taking a slow breath. I kept the mic keyed just long enough to finish the sentence I'd rehearsed. Voice steady, the words making order even while my eyes told me the ridge had breathed. Saddle position, beacon 7C2 bearing 073, signal variable. Opening window 10. I released the key, let the radio breathe too, and wrote the moment in the notebook without adjectives. Ridge optical shift. Hands width, duration, ones, no snow movement audible, no whump. Copy on window 10, dispatch said a second later, as if the sky hadn't moved at all. Weather line now -20, maintain schedule. Copy. I glanced at Melina. She was quiet behind her mask, pencil working. We shared a rule. Describe before, decide. We dropped to listen. The beacon kept its polite drum, 3 seconds, 3, 3, then stretched 1 to 4. The echo delay held, the soft half-second shadow that had followed us since the creek. A gust rode a silver rope across the saddle, and the rope unspooled both ways for a breath before choosing east. The receiver's bed stayed clean, no hiss, no wire song. My sat phone lay on the sled's tray with its battery sled warm under the insulating wrap. I put my glove on it, expecting nothing. A faint tremor touched my palm and stepped away. "Log it," I said to myself, and did. At minute 7, a voice arrived so small that for 2 heartbeats I thought it was Ghost inventing syllables. It wasn't a word, just the shape of one, laid across the floor of the channel, then gone. I didn't key the mic. I drew a tiny rectangle, left it blank, and tried to make my face the mask of a person who heard nothing unusual, so the wind wouldn't hear me admit it. We closed the window at 10 on the dot, the ritual neat. "Decision point," I said. "Rectangle bend holds," Melina answered, pointed. "We don't pay for curiosity with afternoon. We buy another window sooner." "Agreed," I said. We tighten our hop distance, ride the near side of the saddle, and put a probe in any place our eyes don't like. If the beacon pulls more than 2 degrees while the GPS steps north, we note the coincidence and still don't chase it. That got me a look, approval with a string tied to it. She knows where my feet want to go. She helps them earn the right. We stowed the tripod, snapped the Yagi flat, and lashed it. I checked bare end to end, belt, rollers, chain case, track tension. Every fastener said, "Later." Fots answered the same. We shook the flare kit where my hand could find it blind, eased the mylar bivy back into a half-open pocket, and set the avalanche probe along my left rail so its sections would build themselves in seconds if we had to dig. We took the saddle at a bias, low throttle, skis loose, bodies loose. The slope was a sneer of windpack over sugar. My pole found hollow, dense, hollow in a laminate that didn't yet have an opinion, but would learn one if we pushed our luck. We moved in the rhythm we'd practiced, 2 minutes under pour, stop, listen, check the map against the ground, then do it again. The beacon obliged with strength and then coyness. Twice it went to 4-second intervals for half a minute. Twice the GPS put our crumb a meter north the moment the bearing did its tiny bow. I wrote it all without marrying any of it. On the far lip of the saddle, the tracks appeared again where the wind had failed to erase them. The oval prints lengthened as the slope steepened, then did an odd thing. They didn't toe in for switchback the way a tired person in snowshoes would. They kept straight and steady, stride even, tailings wrong side twice where wind wrote nonsense. I set the probe across one and watched spindrift climb the shaft again. Upstream, like a slow spill in reverse, then down as if the hill remembered gravity. Static tricks live in dry cold. I let the label do its job and moved on. We slipped into the lee of a low roll and cut the engines. The world made small noises, tree chatter, our own heat leaving us, a cornice complaining far enough away to be only a note. The air carried no whetstone smell and no fish, just resin and the nickel taste of cold. Good. A wrong smell would have been a shortcut to a decision I didn't have contingency for. "Window in 8, Melina said. "We'll do a fly test," I said. She tilted her head. "We keep tools for when the world refuses to say what it's doing. A fly test is a small audacity. You light a single red flare low and close, down in the lee, and watch how its smoke writes the wind you think you already know. You don't use it when the pack is nervous. You don't use it where heat would insult the slab. Here, under a small roll with our skis buried and the surface stiff, it would cost a minute and buy a map of the air. I cracked the flare just enough to coax it living, cupped the ember, and let the smoke climb into the lee. It rode a gentle ladder up and over our shoulder, then did something I had to watch twice. A thin ribbon peeled sideways, not toward the obvious cross drift, but toward the saddle we had just crossed, as if a second wind lived there under the first. It lasted 5 seconds, then the full wind took it and made the smoke a lesson again. "Layered flow," Melina said, "or a vent." "No vent in the map," I said. The creek was a valley away. "Layered flow then, the saddle's breathing." "You heard it too," she said. I pretended I hadn't used the word. "Window in 3. We staged the tripod tight to the roll and set the Yagi at the angle our bearings had favored. I thumbed the sat phone awake, and, because superstition lives under routine, I felt the battery sled once more and found it honest. I keyed the mic. "Dispatch, SAR-1, window 10, lee of low roll east of saddle, beacon 7C2072, signal stronger, interval mixed 3 and 4 seconds. Continuing rectangle with micro bends for wind slab avoidance. Copy, SAR-1, be advised, a civilian called in from the logging road to the west about seeing lights last night near Ridge 2. No further details. Could be aurora, could be vehicles. Copy, I said, and we both let the word light sit in the air between us like a misplaced tool you don't pick up yet. We went to listen. Minute 2 brought the hiss pair at 2 hertz, shy but there, then a third that came like an echo's cousin. On the edge of hearing, there it was again. The wire song that belonged to city transformers and summer insects, skating just under 3 heartbeats long. The larch were too far apart. The roll had no wire fence. The nearest line was 30 kilometers and a valley away. I logged it underlined once and then put the pencil down before the underline could become an argument. Bearing shift, Melina said softly, eyes on the Yagi's pointer, 1/2 degree north on the 4-second beat. GPS crumb? I asked. She turned the screen. Our breadcrumb had taken its gentleman's step to the north in the same moment, like the 2 devices had chosen a dance and forgot to invite the compass. I kept my hands still. If I looked too eager, the world would change the subject. We closed at 10 and stowed the rig. The wind wrote new sentences across our ski scars. The hill took back what we'd written. We set our machine's nose to a shallow draw that promised less slab and more trees, and rode it in short, non-committal bursts. The beacon kept us on its polite leash. It felt, at that point, like searching with a new trainee, someone who wanted to help but didn't know whether pointing was allowed. At the base of the draw, the tracks crossed our path again, fresher here, the edges crisp where the wind had been polite. A branch lay buried ahead, a bump the size of a boot. The stride did short, long again, exactly where I would have told a trainee to step. I tested the bump with the probe, hollow under 15 centimeters. Good step, again. Either the maker of those ovals knew the ground like a map held in the bones, or they were letting the ground know them back. I didn't like either choice, but the hill asked me to pick. I wrote, trackmaker competent, risk aware. Fuel, Melina said. Return legs still clean with 10-minute pad, I said. If we bend one more time east to stay leeward, we spend 5 of that pad. The weather line says go home on time. Then we take our last window early, she said. If the beacon invites us to do something dumb, we say thank you and don't. Deal. We cut engines in a pocket of spruce where the snow didn't argue. The quiet crawled into my hood. The world made a new small sound, faint, repeated, like a glove drummed with one finger, coming not from any bearing, but from the snow itself somewhere to our right. I held up a finger, and we both listened until it became only wind. Later, I would convince myself it had been wind all along. For the moment, I wrote it with no label. Window opens in 4, Melina said. Let's set the antenna a hair lower, I said. If the multipath is real, we'll favor the direct path. She nodded, adjusted the pitch 2 notches, and we laid the guy line in a cleaner triangle than before. I keyed the mic exactly on the mark. Say R1, window 10, spruce pocket at draw base. Beacon 7C2070, signal steady. No voice intercepts. Proceeding per plan. Dispatch breathed back an acknowledgement and a weather note, like a coin dropped on a table. We listened. The beacon kept to 3 seconds, obedient, as if it had been corrected by a grown-up. The hiss pair stayed away. No wire song. The echo delay lived, patient. Clean, Melina said. Relief edged her voice and then withdrew itself like a hand. Clean, I said. And because clean windows are the ones that invite you to misbehave, I reminded myself out loud. We turn at the next ridgeline, keep the rectangle, and ride home with fuel to spare. We stowed the rig and pointed the skis at the low ridge that made a dark thought against the sky. The light was getting the color it gets when afternoon makes shorter promises. We took the slope in the exact language we'd decided, no faster, no steeper. Halfway up, the echo delay fattened by a breath, then shaved itself thin again. The ridge's shoulder eased a hand's width left and returned. My jaw found the inside of the mask without me telling it to. I picked 3 new anchors with my eyes, spruce knot, wind lip, Melina's pole, and the world sat still out of politeness. At the crest, we dug the skis in deep and let the machines idle while I planted the probe like a mast. The beacon pulsed 333, and I realized with an odd, unhelpful clarity that if I had to draw a diagram of where we were on the map and where the hill believed we were, I'd need 2 papers and a stapler. Turn home, Melina asked. Turn home, I said. But we mark one more thing first. I pulled the flare kit and cracked a red at knee height, downwind, testing the air a second time. The smoke climbed its ladder, then, like before, a ribbon peeled sideways toward the saddle we'd left. 5 seconds of soft insistence, as if the ridge needed you to know which way it breathed when you told it you were going. We watched until the smoke committed to the general wind and became ordinary. Then we turned the machine's nose toward the rectangle's return leg and set our plan in motion. Engines patient, fuel honest, afternoon shorter. The hill writing in a grammar we were learning one clause at a time. Behind us, in the shape of our dug skis, the spindrift filled the negative space with care, as if erasing a mistake without smudging the page. We started the return leg with a plan that fit in the margins of a notebook. Ride the long side of the rectangle home, keep the wind on our left cheek, open one more window before the weather line arrived, and refuse any invitation the beacon made to improvise. The ridge had shuffled twice and pretended not to. That was the kind of weather you don't scold. You square your sums and let the day grade you later. The light flattened into the color of old paper. Horizon and ground argued again over the job description of edge. Whiteout is only half a visual problem. The other half is arithmetic. Speed times interval times drift equals where you wish you were, minus the lie your vestibular system tells when the world removes contrast. That's the algebra. If you write it down, you keep your feet. 2 minutes under power, 1 to check, I said. Repeat. We'll make our own landmarks. Copy, Melina said. She moved her wrist so the watch face caught what passed for sun, and set a quiet metronome with her thumb. Our machines idled like good dogs waiting for a word. We took the first 2-minute hop. I counted heartbeats to keep time honest, then killed the engine and let the world settle. The echo delay came home with its shaved corners a half-second late, patient as a tail. 3 pulses of the beacon at 3 seconds, then a 4th stretched. The bearing bowed north by a degree the same breath the GPS put our crumb 2 meters north, again, their private dance. I made the line in the notebook neat enough that the wind couldn't smear it if I held the page open. We moved again. Spindrift braided in sideways threads, thin enough to look polite until you tried to read the ground through them. On the 3rd stop, I stepped out with the probe and felt the layer stack count itself. Chalky cap, 5 centimeters of wind slab, then the sugar that writes letters you hope to never read. I pushed harder, and the slab muttered a syllable. No whump, just an opinion. I marked the spot with ribbon and added a meter of respect. Window in 24, Melina said. We'd slid the schedule early at the larch. Now the clock wanted its tithe back. The weather line does that, moves the denominator when you're still copying the problem. Fuel says we can buy one more adjustment, I said. If we spend it now to stay leeward, we pay with dusk on the river cut. Pay later, she said. We'll keep the line and delete anything steeper than it looks. The tracks visited us one more time when the wind lost interest for a minute. The ovals kept their bad habit of clean toe lifts and long pinches. Stride did short, long across what looked like nothing, until I set the probe and found air under 15 centimeters again. An old willow chilled into a void. The print edges were younger than they had been, crisper, a wet black beneath the white. But the air here was drier than the wind on our cheeks. Cold has its own smells, resin, wool, the nickel taste. This patch added a faint iron that didn't belong to blood or machine. I didn't name it. I wrote cold sweet because the word sweet is harmless to a log. We let the beacon speak and pretended it wasn't deciding things. It pulsed correct, and then, like someone leaning in, pulsed 4 for a whole minute, bearing holding at 069, but wobbling a half degree north on each long beat. My pencil found the margin. Long interval minute, bearing micro bow sync with GPS north step, echo delay unchanged. Clean sentences make fear smaller. Whiteout pushed its palm harder over the world. We switched to instruments and rules. I set our course by 3 anchors. Compass heading, wind on the left cheek, Fox's track on my right, close enough to read with a pole tip, far enough that one mistake wouldn't teach the other. Without a visible horizon, small slopes feel like decisions made about you. We took them like the slow students we were. Window in 3, Melina said. The wind was kind enough to let the words arrive whole. We found a shallow lip, a dignity to hide behind, and dug the skis until the machines agreed to stay. The tripod plate clicked into the snow like we'd practiced in a parking lot in autumn, with rain pretending to be sleet. I laid the guy line in the same triangle I always trust. The receiver gain came down until our sleeves sounded like paper again. I thumbed the sat phone. Bars flickered, held, lied, held. Under the insulating wrap, the battery sled felt warm, with the kind of warmth that means present, not working too hard. I kept my palm a breath above it and let my pulse settle before I touched anything. SAR-1, opening window 10, whiteout conditions, machine dug Lee, I keyed. Beacon 7C2 bearing 069, interval mixed, continuing return leg per plan. Dispatch's reply arrived clipped and living. Copy SAR-1, weather line now -35. If you don't have the subject in 30, initiate return, even if beacon strengthens. Repeat, even if beacon strengthens. Orders can be merciful when you want them to be cruel. I looked at Melina. Her pencil paused, then wrote exactly what dispatch had said. We went to listen. Minute 1 gave us the polite drum. Minute 2, the hiss duet at 2 hertz, closer than before, the kind you can mistake for a mitten brushed on plastic. We both went still. It repeated 2 minutes later, then forgot us. In minute 4, the wire song returned, skating under 3 kids like a transformer a block away, 3 heartbeats long, then gone. The nearest line lived valleys away. I wrote, wire song 3x1s and 3 kid, no visible conductor, wind steady. I kept my face neutral until I remembered I was wearing a mask. Narrow beam swing? Melina asked, eyes on the Yagi. I gave her a 2-degree sweep. The bearing sat at 069 for the 3-second beats, then made its half-degree bow north on the 4-second ones and returned on the next 3. That was new, a coupling not just in time, but in the style of time. The GPS crumb paid its gentleman's step north in those same instants, like 3 friends learning a slow dance under bad lighting. I wrote it without naming it. Minute 8 brought a voice-shaped thing again. Not words, but syllable shapes laid like cloth on the floor of the channel. I didn't key the mic. I wrote a rectangle and left it blank a second time. When you can't make a transcript, you don't pretend. We closed at 10. Decision in 20, I said. 20 minutes until dispatch's 30 became now. Fuel gives us a straight shot home with 5-minute pad if we stop playing school, Melina said. Whiteout algebra says the hills want to collect interest. Agreed. I hated the word and liked the honesty. We stay on plan. If the beacon invites us to be heroes, we say we're busy. We stowed the rig and moved in our 2-minute rhythm. Run, stop, listen, check, log. The wind flattened the world into a single sheet and wrote fast, illegible signatures over our tracks. Twice I stopped us for arithmetic, checked pace against drift, and tuned the bias a degree to keep the wind where it belonged on my cheek. Once the ridge to our left stepped a hand's width and back again, and I let it. It's easier to forgive tricks when you've decided your next 3 moves in a line. At a small hollow where the spindrift, for once, couldn't quite commit, I set a micro pit with the saw. The block came out neat. I pressed and it failed on the sugar with a sigh that belonged in a library. We bought 5 minutes to go around and paid with the sun's last generosity. Rain checks aren't honored here. Window in 32, Melina said. That would be our last before the order became a law. Make it our best, I said. The wind answered with a low thread, not a gust, a drum-tight hum in the snow itself, like wire tuned by a careful hand. I felt it in my feet more than I heard it. It moved from right to left, then unrolled itself back. The echo delay stayed loyal. I put 2 lines in the notebook and didn't connect them. We dug a lee behind a shaped drift no taller than a table. The tripod bit. The Yagi took its pitch. I set the receiver's gain low enough the world would have to ask to be heard. I thumbed the sat phone because I needed one thing I could command. Bars held, then pretended to think, then held again. I put my glove on the sled. There, the faint small tremor like a stuck motor unsticking, a hum my pulse wanted to own. I lifted my hand and let it go away. SAR-1, window 10, last scheduled before turn home, I keyed. Beacon 7C2068, interval now mostly 4, occasional 3. No voice intercepts, whiteout conditions increasing. Copy, dispatch said. Advise, logging road caller updated. Reports hearing a distant machine last night, near Ridge 2. Unknown. No crews in that area. Negative vehicles seen. Copy, I said. Melina wrote it and bracketed it like an errand we hadn't agreed to run. We listened. The beacon settled into 4-second discipline, like someone had visited and set it straight. Bearing held the north bow for each long beat, then behaved on the occasional 3. The hiss duet arrived once, exactly at the minute mark. in a way that made the hair at the back of my neck acknowledge it knew how to count. A syllable-shaped not-word laid over the bed and pressed one corner of itself into clarity, just enough for my brain to consider a letter, then flattened. "Time," Melina said. "Time," I answered. I could have said turn home and would have meant the same. We packed the tripod, smoothed the snow, and let the world erase our camp. The machine started without needing persuasion. We pointed their noses to the line that would forgive us and let the wind hold our left cheeks like a teacher turning a child toward the door. Whiteout took the rest of the horizon. We became two small engines moving through a single idea. The echo delay stayed with us, faithful. The GPS crumb obeyed on the big moves and danced its north step with the bearing when the beacon remembered its 4-beat. The tracks didn't visit again. The iron sweet left the air. We counted minutes with pencil taps against mittens and promised ourselves a stove and 4 walls and a debrief in frost where we would turn this day into nouns and numbers on paper. We reached the top of a shallow roll where the creek seam would decide our last bias home. The wind pulled its low thread across the snow, and the ridge we weren't looking at exhaled, or we only remembered it wrong. The beacon tapped 4-4-4 with a discipline that felt like a hand on our shoulder. Dispatch's order sat in my pocket, heavier than the flare kit. "Turn," Melina said. "Turn," I said. I put my thumb on Bear's throttle, the way you hold a sentence until it behaves, and we let the math take us where the rules said we belonged. Behind us, the spindrift covered our last pause with the same care a clerk uses on a ledger. Neat, straight, inevitable. Turning home simplified the math, but complicated the conscience. Orders had put a line under the day. 30 minutes to comply, and then we belonged to the weather, not the beacon. We rode the long leg with our faces set to the wind, using the 2-minute hop we'd promised ourselves. Run, stop, listen, check. In whiteout, a plan is as warm as a stove. Dusk came sideways, more a thinning of contrast than a color. Spindrift ran lower, like water when the tide slackens. Air felt denser, and with it the sound. The engine's note sat closer to our helmets. The echo delay thickened a finger's width and then stayed faithful, a half-second shadow with a coat on. "Temperature?" Melina asked at a pause. I clipped the small thermometer to a ski tip and shaded it with a mitten. "-27, I said. I held it near the surface of the snow and watched it slide farther. -32 at the skin. In the hollows, colder. Night thermals, cold air settling into folds, makes its own map. You ride the edges where the temperature grammar changes, like reading a river by the smooth and the boil. "Fuel?" she said. "Honest for home with 5 minutes we don't owe," I said, which meant we had none to lend. The beacon, good student now, kept mostly to 4-second intervals. On those long beats, the bearing made its polite half-degree bow north, and the GPS crumb stepped a meter north, as if rising when the teacher entered. I wrote it with the same neat hand I used when I was 12, and wanted the page to fix the world. We hit the lip that would let us drop to the creek seam without picking a fight with the slabs. The light made a single sheet. I placed 3 anchors where the world still had texture, a stub of larch, a wind lip like a page corner, the darker line where the seam might be if memory and map agreed. We took the slope sideways, engines quiet enough that the wind owned the conversation again. "Window," Melina said. She was already checking her watch out of habit. "We're off schedule," I said. "Orders say home, head and hands say keep one ear. We'll do a silent listen at the seam. No transmit unless we hear a person." She nodded and didn't write it. "Night adds ink to your decisions whether or not you bring a pen." We slipped into the seam's lee, a narrow corridor between snow pillows where willows wrote low cursive on the wind. The smell changed here, less resin, more ice metal, clean like a new coin, sweeter down low where the cold pooled. I probed the snow by reflex, crust, slab, then the sugar that had threatened all afternoon. The layer stack felt tighter now, as if the night had laced it down. That's the trick of cold. It can make danger hold its breath until a foot teaches it the next line. We killed the engines and let the quiet climb into our hoods. The echo delay held, rounded and full. The beacon tapped 4-4-4 with schoolroom discipline. The hiss duet at 2 hertz returned once, close enough that my glove twitched, then walked past like a stranger who had almost recognized us. And there was the wire song again. 3 beats under 3 key, thinner than before, a transformer that had moved farther away. Temperature layers conduct sound like a tunnel. Tonight the air had stacked itself into a set of careful shelves and was carrying distant nonsense in neat packets. I thumbed the sat phone awake out of habit and held my glove a breath above its battery sled. No tremor. The warmth felt right, not the busy heat of a thing lying to you. I put the phone down and stared at the snow to keep my hands from wanting a label for every feeling. A voice-shaped something arrived then, not on frequency, but through the air itself. A syllable with its edges shaved off, laid across the seam like cloth. It wasn't words. It was the shape of a word with no letters. Night thermals do that. They pick up sounds a valley away and lay them at your feet. I let the notebook have it. Airborne syllable shape, no directionality, likely ducting. Copy? Melina said, soft. Air, I said. Not radio. Saying it made it truer but not easier. We ate standing up because sitting steals heat you don't earn back. Nuts brittle as glass, chocolate that forgave teeth now that the cold had decided to help. I forced the food into gradual obedience and set the flare kit where my fingers would find it without thought. The mylar bivy wanted to live deeper in the pouch. I pulled a corner out and left it ready. Plan, Melina said, not impatient. Straight line to the logging track with 2 check stops, I said. One at the stand we called a star, one at the shallow saddle with the smoke trick. No acoustic heroics, no detours, no knees that pretend to be younger. Copy, she said. I'll take lead on the next 2 hops. You keep the line. We made the first hop along the seam and climbed to where the ground remembered to be a slope. The engine sounded heavier in the cold. Same throttle, different chest. The echo delay kept its patient half-second with a thicker coat. The beacon held 4 like a mantra. The GPS played its north step with each long beat, and I let it. I had decided to obey only the algebra that put home at the end of the equation. At the Starlarch stand, we dug the skis, stacked the triangle of bamboo, and listened again because we are the kind of team that keeps a promise to the book, even when the book isn't in charge. The hiss duet stayed away. The wire song didn't visit. The syllable shape came back as a smear and then became wind. I keyed the mic once, not to transmit, but to feel the detent under my thumb and remember I chose not to. Discipline is a habit you pack next to the stove. We took the second hop, the long one, to the saddle with the smoke sideways truth. The light had the quality of attention going narrow. The world wants you to be smaller at night, so it can hold you without losing you. We set skis deep in the saddle's lee and let the silence arrange itself. Wind's changed voice, Melina said. She's a better ear than I am. She pointed with her chin at nothing obvious. I lit a single red at knee height, cupped it so heat wouldn't insult the slab, and let the smoke write the new grammar. It climbed, decided, and peeled for 5 seconds toward the place it had peeled before, back into the saddle we had already crossed, as if the hill wanted us to remember how it breathes at night. The ribbon was tighter now, a narrower invitation. Layered flow, I said, stronger. I crushed the flare out and laid the stub in the tin. We smoothed the snow where we'd made heat to keep the slab's pride intact. The beacon, polite, shifted to 3-second pulses for 1 minute, as if correcting itself in front of the class. The bearing stopped its north bow for those 60 seconds. The GPS crumb obeyed the same halt. Then both returned to their long beat dance. It wasn't the hill, it wasn't the wind. It was the beacon deciding which rules we liked. Orders had told us not to enjoy the puzzle. I admitted the itch and put my glove back on my pencil. Fuel, Melina said. Enough to hand the machines to the shed without apology, I said. I wanted to add if we don't build a bivy, but the mylar was already winking silver from my pocket and didn't need an invitation. We eased the machines off the saddle and let gravity do more than throttle. The creek seam gathered us into its cool grammar again. The sound ducting grew stronger. Our engine's note came back to us from downstream like another team riding a polite distance behind. I threw a snowball to time the delay. Thump. Half-second later, a rounded thump with the edges filed. The syllable shape didn't return. We found the logging track by the way the willows stood aside for it, and because the snow there had a worked look that weather alone doesn't make. The cold settled another degree, and the wind quit inventing new ideas. Night thermals, done pretending they were getting started, lay down in the low places and kept the world close to the ground. That would help the radio and punish any guest that wanted a high ridge. Call it the road, I said, then base. Copy, she said. But we both knew the habit. One more listen because the day felt like it wanted one more thing written down. We cut the engines and opened our hoods enough to let the air touch our faces so our ears could work. The echo delay moved closer, a loyal dog. The beacon tapped 4 like a clock that didn't need us. The hiss duet arrived once, exactly on the minute, and left. The wire song tried to be a rumor and gave up. From far down the track, carried on cold shelves, came a machine note that wasn't ours. It wasn't on frequency. It was airborne and wrong in size for a snow machine, and right in cadence for something turning with care. "Logging road caller," Melina said, barely a breath. "Could be our own engines bouncing from a bend," I said, because you keep the mind from volunteering complicated options when simple ones haven't failed yet. I set the probe on the snow, not because I needed to dig, but because my left hand wanted something true to hold. The aluminum took the cold and gave it back. I keyed the mic. Dispatch SAR-1 at logging track. Turning home. No subject located. Beacon behavior logged. Will deliver notes on arrival. Whiteout held but easing under thermals. Engines and personnel nominal. They acknowledged, wrote the weather line into our sentence again, and asked for ETA. I gave them one that fit the night's arithmetic and didn't ask the hill for credit. We mounted, noses pointed along the track's shallow grammar, and let the machines write the last chapter. Behind us, the saddle we'd left breathed once more in the corner of my eye and then, politely, held still. The beacon pulsed 4, 4, 4, as if it had been satisfied to see us go. The air smelled like metal and the idea of resin. My left pocket held a wink of silver. We rode the night like a rule. The logging track simplified the world the way a ruled page helps a tired hand. Trees stood aside and a discipline roads teach. Night thermals settled the air into shelves. Sound moved like water along them. We rode side by side, Fox a step forward so my eyes could hold 3 anchors. Melina's tail lamp, the track's shallow shoulder, a darker seam where the ditch kept its own cold. "ETA if the road behaves?" she asked at a stop. 45, I said, plus the taxes we know about, minus the ones we don't. Fuel stayed honest. The wind had quit inventing and chosen a constant sentence. The beacon had kept 4-second discipline for 10 minutes, like a metronome that had finally been given a job. We ran 2 minutes under throttle and stopped to listen, because the night asked for respect. The echo delay carried home each sound with its rounded edge, half a second behind, as faithful as a dog. The hiss duet at 2 hertz visited once and did not linger. The wire song skated under 3 hertz for a heartbeat, farther away than it had been, then forgot us. We rode again. The track lifted a little where the old road crew had thrown spoil to build a crown. On our right, the ditch deepened, a cold ribbon where the thermometer would have bragged 2 degrees lower. I pointed with my chin and Melina nodded. There's a vocabulary you learn on winter crews that uses face and shoulders the way summer crews use hands. At the second stop, I checked our breadcrumb trail out of habit. The GPS drew our route along the road with the neatness of a clerk. Then, as the beacon ticked its long beat, the crumb took its gentleman's step north by a meter and returned on the next 3. Exactly as it had on the ridge. On paper, the map stayed courteous. On the screen, it got ideas. I wrote it down without giving it a theory to live in. "Bearing?" Melina asked, eyes on the Yagi's pointer strapped along the sled. 067 to the beacon on the long beat, I said. I wasn't supposed to be checking. Orders had turned us home. But information doesn't stop presenting itself when you close the book. 068 on the 3s. "Copy," she said, not correcting me. The road kept our ethics tidy. We took the next hop. Distant through the air shelves came a machine note, not ours. Slow cadence, as if someone worked a throttle respectfully against a load. Thermals carry another team to your ear from a valley away and make them sound like neighbors. When the note arrived again, higher on its own echo, I told myself the old truth first. Sound lies at night, direction more than distance. We stopped and let the silence put the noise on a shelf where it matched something we could use. It stayed there, undecided, then became wind again. The map broke a little after that. On our left, a cut bank we both knew by its crescent shadow did not appear. On our right, a stand of young larch that should have greeted us waited 2 minutes late. In our helmets, the world still contained them. On the ground, they'd shifted like furniture in a room you didn't leave. I lifted my goggles to sharpen contrast and found none waiting. The beacon kept time like a satisfied teacher. The GPS put its crumbs where the road should be, and sometimes where it was. The compass needle held steady, polite. The part of the brain that draws rooms for you miscolored a corner and then painted over the mistake so fast I had to write it to believe it. Map says curve, Melina said. Eyes say straight, I answered. We trust the ditch. The ditch is honest. It follows gravity without creativity. We kept it on our right and let it teach us the road's absent curve with its own slow bend. At the next stop, I pulled the sat phone, thumbed it awake, and laid my palm above the battery sled without touching. No tremor lived there. Warmth felt like an honest coin, not a busy lie. I looked at the flare kit to remind myself of the line between information and theater, and closed the pouch enough to keep the corner of mylar ready. We moved again, and the night forced us smaller. Pines leaned in until their lower branches brushed our shoulders like guards closing ranks. Patient light became our best tool. Headlamps stepped down to a low setting that didn't throw shadows into lies. Snow machine lamps dimmed to avoid building a wall of white. On low power, light listens before it speaks. In that quiet level, the world offered texture, tree bark ribbed, corn snow glittering a little where thermals forgot to sit, our own breath silvering and clearing like careful tide. I set the lamps to pulse, not for drama, but for measurement. Half-second low to high to low, a PWM ladder that counted in my glove without a clock. With the echoes running a fixed delay, you can time a landscape and see if it answers differently than air. We stood quiet in a trackside notch and let the pulse walk into the night. The echo came back with the same half-second lag and no change in color. Nothing held a mirror we didn't want. Radio window, Melina said, half habit, half question. Silent listen, I said. No transmit. Words taste better when you've considered the wrong ones first. We knelt to the snow because listening is easier closer to the grammar you're translating. Up close, the road read as a worked surface. Grains aligned by old blades, bumps repeating under the spindrift. Under my glove, the snow felt colder than the air by the amount night takes as a gratuity. Right where the ditch deepened, the cold concentrated enough to make my fingertips sting even through the glove. Temperature pockets living where water once walked. I logged it. The beacon ticked its 4-second bridle. The GPS crumb learned its north step dance on those same beats and stayed straight on the 3s. The machine note arrived again. Airborne, ducted. A respectful throttle against a load, not near, not far. It came with a second thing nested under it, so soft I might have invented it. A syllable shape without letters laid along the ground like cloth. I resisted the urge to chase direction with my chin. Night does not forgive head fakes. I wrote a small rectangle and left it blank. When you can't transcript, you inventory. We hit the junction where a winter spur takes woodcutters to a stand beyond the creek. The signpost is a stub of angle iron painted a color the night eats. We found it by contradiction, the way the wind rode around it. Our GPS crumbs had 2 histories here. One from summer survey, one from last week. Tonight, the crumb from last week ran north of the iron by 2 meters during the long beats, then sat on it exactly on the 3s. If the road had stepped, it did it with us, not to us. Left for home, Melina said. Left, I agreed. I let bear idle while I walked 5 steps up the spur to confirm our memory. A culvert throat under the snow, a willow with a scar at waist height, a drift that always writes itself into a low couch. All present, though shifted a hand's width right, like a shy person moving out of a doorway. When I turned back, Fox's tail lamp made a patient red coin in the hush. We took the homeward turn. A minute later, the beacon's strength climbed by a bar and then let the bar go, like breath held and released. The bearing didn't change. The timing stayed 4. The GPS crumb played its small north step with it. I wrote, strength blip, no geometry change, because the notebook prefers sentences to ideas. Headache? Melina asked suddenly. Not yet, I said. Eyes and math, yes. Same, she said. Eyes want to round corners that aren't there. We dialed the headlamps down another notch. Patient light made the world gentler and more honest. It let terrain speak in statements instead of underlining its own adjectives. We rode a slow ladder, 50 meters, stop, listen, 50 meters, stop, check. At one stop, I felt the probe wanting work and gave it a bite. Slab over sugar still, but the cold had tightened the seam until it answered with a dull knock rather than a sigh. Safer here, for now. I tapped the probe sections apart and stowed it along my rail, where my left hand always finds it. Somewhere in the next stretch, the map's disagreement became explicit. The GPS said, bridge soon. The ditch said, low place now. My goggles said, white. The compass was a good citizen and gave me south, where south belonged. We slowed to a walking pace and found the bridge by smell before shape. The old timbers give a dry, sweet note when the temperature drops past a certain truth. We eased onto it and let the machine step like animals learning ice. Planks held. The echo delay fattened a breath and then put its coat back on. In the notch below the bridge, a darker cold pooled like smoke in reverse. I glanced down and saw nothing but the idea of a hollow. On the far side, we cut engines and stood for a count of 60 to let the world put itself away. It did, mostly. The metronomic beacon kept 4. On the 90th second, exactly when my thumb tapped the mitten out of habit, the wire song returned, thin as moth wing, 3 beats at a 3 Hz. Then the hiss duet added itself, 2 pips near 2 Hz. The syllable shape laid one corner near my boot and moved on like a thought you decide not to keep. I felt the weight of the flare kit at my hip and didn't touch it. Patient light, Melina said, almost to herself. Let's keep it this low all the way in. Agreed, I said. Headlamps at their kindest kept the track from becoming a lie. On that low pulse, we saw more than the bright would have given us. A fox print cut across our line and blew away. Ice beads in the ditch rolled a centimeter and stopped. A small breath rose from the culvert throat and laid itself flat again, as if the creek had tried to remember being water. We rode the last kilometer toward the first radio repeater, the one that makes dispatch sound like someone speaking through wool. The world obeyed the road again. The map remembered itself. The crumbs north step still danced with the beacon's long beats, but I could put that in a box labeled, "To be argued in a warm room." Orders had gotten what they asked. The hill had made its breathing known. The day had written its nouns. At the last pause before the yard, a light stood steady where no light belongs. Low, amber, the size of a hand at arm's length, near the bend where the track went behind the shed. I didn't announce it. I dialed my lamp to steady and let the patient light listen. The amber didn't move. It did not blink or grow. It sat. We rode toward it in first gear, skis tracing lines that would be easy to reread in a morning. At 10 meters, the amber resolved into what it wasn't. Not a fire, not a headlamp, not a vehicle. A frost-coated reflector somebody had wired to a post last summer looked back at us through a skin of rime, catching our small light and giving it back with patience. The rime had made it glow from within. I smiled inside the mask. No audience, no performance. Because relief that simple is a good end to a complicated paragraph. We rolled into the yard with the machines idling their last tidy notes. The shed made its wood smell, and the heater coughed in its way. The beacon pulsed 4, 4, 4, as though it had accompanied us and now waited outside like a polite dog. I signed the sleds in the log, hands steady with the kind of tired that keeps promises. Debrief with maps? Melina said. Debrief with maps, I said, and a stove that says yes. I looked once at the sat phone, thought of the hum that sometimes wasn't, and set it face down on the bench so it could be a tool again instead of a character. Outside, patient light held on the reflector while the world decided whether to remember what we'd written in it. Inside the shed, we hung the helmets over the heater grates and stood in the steam of our own breath until faces remembered skin. I stowed the flare kit in the peg above the bench and draped the mylar bivy so it would dry without becoming a crackling question later. Bear and Fox ticked themselves cooler. The day shrank to papers, pencils, and a stove that worked like a good sentence. We run debriefs on a small table with a lip on it so the wind can't steal the map. I spread the topo, put our GPS crumbs on top, and stacked the radio log beside it. Melina worked in line items while I drew small boxes around the minutes that had asked us to be smarter than we were. North step with long interval, I said, tapping a column. 72 events across 6 windows. Always on the 4s, never on the 3s. Within half a degree on the bearing bow, she said, pencil steady. 2 meters north on the crumb, never south, never east-west. Echo delay constant, I added. Half second, with a coat on at night. She drew a neat underline. Hiss duet near 2 Hz appears 10 times. Wire song at about 3 kHz 7 times, both more frequent after dusk. Tracks do short, long over hollows, I said. Tailings wrong side twice where wind should have cleaned them. Toe lifts too clean. Temperature pockets colder than the air at the bottom of prints. Fly tests, she said. Smoke peels 5 seconds toward the saddle on 2 exposures. Layered flow stronger at night. And we let the column sit and make a pattern without the dignity of a theory. Outside the shed door, The wind ran a low hand along the boards, the sound thin and even. In the back of the room, the sat phone lay face down on the bench, like I'd promised it a simpler job. My left palm remembered the faint tremor that sometimes lived under it. I made my hand pick up a pencil instead. "Orders," Melina said, like a heading. "Obeyed, subject not located, beacon remains active." I flipped the receiver back on without keying. The beacon obliged like a student called to the blackboard. 4, 4, 4. The bearing sat at 068. When one interval corrected to 3, the pointer walked half a degree back towards south, and our crumb, on replay, forgot its gentleman's step. I slowed the playback until the 4 sounded like breathing. On the shelf by the window, the old mechanical anemometer ticked its spoon against the stop with each gust. A small sound, honest. "Wind?" I asked. 15 in the yard, she said, glancing at the digital mounted by the door. 20 on the ridge if it cares to be consistent. Gusts at 25. We stayed quiet while the anemometer ticked 3 times with a gust, then twice with the next, then 3 again. It didn't mean anything. Wind has its own numbers. Still, I wrote the minute down because the habit cost nothing, and not writing had a price I didn't want the hill to collect. I pulled the recorder's copy from the sled, its micro SD in a plastic box, and seated it into the laptop with hands that had decided not to shake. The black box writes a plain multiplexer, time code, IMU, pack mirror, thruster PWM, light levels, hydrophone channel, altimeter timing, gimbal encoder, a pilot cam for sync. We don't keep pictures, we keep truth about machines. "Blind pass first," I said. We ran the logs with the screens dark, only clocks. I marked each missed blink with a hash on the page. Night grew more misses than day, but only in short gardens, little rows with neat edges. I overlaid a simple light pulse ladder. We'd run for a kilometer, half-second low, high, low. The recorder's misted blinks did not care for it. The beacon did. When the pulse light stepped to high, the 4-second intervals arrived with better posture, and the bearing bow north sharpened a hair. On low, the rhythm some sagged and the bow softened. Instruments shouldn't flirt. "Hydrophone," Melina said, and we both waited for the thing to arrive we knew would. At T+0213 of window 10 at the creek, the hiss duet marched across the bed. 2 pips near 2 hertz. Under it, faint enough to blame on nothing, 3 fence wire notes walked at 3 kits for a single step and stopped, like someone testing if sound on a shelf comes back labeled. "Ducting," I said, making the word work like insulation. "Ducting," she agreed, not surrendering to it. We built a small grid on clear acetate, rows for the windows, columns for the oddities. I put a dot for each hiss pair, a triangle for the wire song, and a square for the moments the ridge decided to move the width of a hand. The shapes clustered, more after dusk, more along the saddle and the larch star, fewer near the creek seam. We drew a shaded band where our fly tests had peeled smoke sideways. When we laid the acetate on the map, the band and the cluster chose each other like magnets. "Layered flow," Melina said again. "Sound shelf runs along the saddle and into the star. It lives higher at dusk." "Wind that counts," I said, before I knew I'd said it. She tilted her head. I tapped the anemometer, listened to its small tick-tick-tick. "We got fooled by terrain all day, but the air is the one doing math." "Fine," she said. "What does it solve?" "Not naming that yet," I said, and gave the words a home in the margin instead of the center of the page. We built a morning plan that could live in an order book. A dawn rectangle offset 20 meters south to resample the band, a new light pulse ladder with a different duty cycle, a half-hour allowance near the star to lay bamboo in a straight line and see if the line stayed straight in the log. We added one controlled hover at the saddle's lip, thrusters at fixed PBN while we counted the echo and timed the beacon's long beats against it. We wrote no heroics at the top in the same pencil we'd used for the fuel math. "Extraction window?" she asked. 17:15 if we earn it, I said. "Dusk extraction only if the sled logs show that band stays shallow. If it lifts with night, we don't chase it uphill." She nodded. Her nods are instruments. They don't give opinions, they return readings. "We pack for a cold bivy. Mylar and stove in each sled," I said. "Flare kit in the left thigh pocket. Sat phone works or doesn't. We treat it like a tool, not a character. Probe on the left rail, assembled in 4 pulls." We fell into one last routine. Machines wiped and vacuumed of melt. Belts retensioned a hair against the cold. Runners checked for loose bolts by glove feel, fuel topped. I walked bare end to end with a cloth to feel grit under the grease where grit shouldn't be. The shed smelled like wool and a small proud amount of gasoline. I glanced at the door, silly, and half expected the beacon to step through like a person unwilling to be left outside. It stayed in the air where it belonged. Dispatch called before we called them. Their wool-voiced repeater pitched their sentences small. Say R1, Beacon 7C2 still active. No new calls. If you intend to redeploy at dawn, confirm plan and personnel count. 2 personnel, 2 machines, I said. Dawn rectangle offset south, windows on the hour. 1 controlled hover, no heroics. Dusk extraction only if conditions permit. Logging road caller last night may have heard ducted sound, not engines. Copy all, the dispatcher said. Weatherline retreats at first light, resumes after 1400, temperatures -30 at surface, colder in hollows. Report any voice intercepts immediately. Copy, I said. The word did its work and didn't change the world. We took 10 minutes to be human. Stove lit, cups held close, heat turned into a fact. The room loosened around our shoulders. I tried to give my eyes a wall that wouldn't move. Through the window, the yard anemometer spun like a lazy hand. The heater's cough took its interval and returned with its small rattle exactly where it should be. Then the wind changed voice. It wasn't faster. It counted. The anemometer ticked the spoon against the stop. Tick, tick, near 2 per second, then fell silent, then ticked again at the same pace, 3 times in a group. I looked at the digital anemometer and saw only wind. I looked at Melina and she had already written the time. Coincidence, I said, because you start with the cheap label first, so the expensive one has to earn itself. Coincidence, she agreed. The beacon obliged our skepticism by stepping back to 3-second discipline, as if to say it had nothing to do with the yard. We cleaned our cups and laid gear in a row by the door. Probe, saw, shovel, bamboo, Yagi, tripod, batteries in the inside pockets where they'd wake warm. I opened the flare kit and set a single red on top like a book left spine up. A promise to a future where we did not need it and could say so in writing. I stepped outside to breathe night air with my whole face and checked the sky. Stars lived behind a gauze. The wind ran even along the yard. In the corner by the generator shed a little ribbon of powder lifted and peeled sideways for 5 seconds, toward the dark where the saddle lay a valley away, then obeyed the main flow. I did not light a flare to test it. The yard forgives an experiment until the morning you don't deserve. I stood and let the cold find the bones it always counts. Inside, the radio made its small bed noises. I turned the receiver gain low and let the world speak only if it wanted to be heard. For 3 minutes, it said nothing. On the 4th, a soft duet of hiss walked near 2 hertz across the floor of the channel. 2 pips, a pause, 2 pips, and left. The anemometer, as if embarrassed, ticked twice against its stop, and then behaved. Set alarms, Melina said. 0530. We want cords flaked, housings wiped, Stein be wiped, and GPS cleaned by first gray. It copy, I said. We wrote the last line in the debrief log. Wind counted in yard, matching cadence observed in field. Note without weight. The rule is you can write the oddity as long as you deny it the throne. We killed the lights in sequence, so the room could tell us if it would move. It didn't. We lay down on bunks that remembered crews better and older than us. The beacon tapped 4 in the receiver's low bed, like a clock that regretted not being a stove. The wind put its hand on the shed roof and patted twice, polite. I let sleep come a ½ inch at a time, and promised the morning the same routine in a careful voice. When the alarm went, the sky hadn't yet chosen a color. We dressed the way we'd written we would. The anemometer ticked honestly. The beacon waited. Dawn doesn't forgive shortcuts. We opened the door into cold that made the teeth feel like metal, and the day agreed to be counted. Dawn came as a gray that forgave nothing. We geared in the order we'd written on the map edge. Inner gloves, probe on left rail, shovel on right, saw in the back pouch, tripod plate clipped to the Yagi case, sat phone in the inside chest, where it could borrow body heat without becoming a character. Bear and Fox started like they'd slept. Frost lifted off their hoods in small ghosts, and then and surrendered to the cold again. Your rectangle offset 20 meters south, I said, tapping the acetate we'd drawn. Windows on the hour, 1 controlled hover at the saddle lip. No heroics. Dusk extraction only if the band stays shallow. Copy, Melina said. She set her watch, and we synced by breathing 3 beats together, an old crew trick to make clocks into ribs. The beacon, polite, pulsed at 3 for 2 minutes like it wanted us to start clean. Then it remembered 4. We took the logging track until the road forgot to exist, then stepped into the open country where yesterday's sentences had been written and erased. Thermals hadn't yet built their shelves. Sound moved thinner. The echo delay trimmed its coat to the summer version of a half second. The wind went steady in a voice I trusted to say its name. At the Larch Star, we buried the skis to the knees and made our first window. Tripod down, Yagi pitched where the band had lived, gain low so sleeve sounds would read as paper, not thunder. I keyed the mic on the mark. Dispatch, SAR-1, opening window 10 at Larch Star. Rectangle south, offset engaged. Beacon 7C2 bearing 069, interval mixed, strength 1 to 2 bars. Weather stable, -26 at surface. Copy, SAR-1, Wool voice said. No new calls. Weather line mild until 1400. Report voice intercepts immediately. Copy, I said, and we went to listen. Minute 3 brought a single hiss pair at 2 hertz, frail as an afterthought. No wire song. The bearing bowed its half-degree north on the long beats, and the GPS crumb, on fresh track, took its gentleman's step with it. I underlined the timing and let the pencil rest. We set bamboo on a straight 15-meter line downwind of the star and logged each pole as if it were a person. The plan said we would return and see if the line stayed a line in the recorder's memory. On the way out, I pressed my palm to the sat phone through the jacket, warmth read honest, no hum. I refused the urge to check 2 more times. We skied the machines along the south offset leg, riding the edge of yesterday's shaded band. The slope here was the kind that steals attention without bragging. 3 degrees of good manners, a surface hard enough to carry but soft enough to hide its seams. The quiet slope. You can make mistakes here that you only notice later when the arithmetic won't balance. Fly test? Melina asked. At the lip, I said. Not here. The slab under us had the wrong glassiness for heat. We carried the flare kits like promises and left them in their pockets. 2 minutes under power, 1 to check. The snow columns counted under the probe like a hymn. 5 centimeters chalk, 5 wind slab, 10 of sugar, then a denser layer that seemed to like responsibility. I wrote numbers, drew small rectangles where the sugar felt thinner. The beacon kept 4. The echo delay stayed trimmed. The bearing bow and crumb step did their dance with fewer excuses. Morning makes patterns confess. We came up on the saddle's lip. Yesterday it had breathed left, right, left under the smoke. Now, in the honest light, it read as a subtle terrace with a leeward curl. The kind of feature you respect without applause. We made camp in its shallow lee, tripoded the Yagi, lashed the guy line to Bear's ski, and set the hover rig. Thrusters at a fixed PWM, gimbal locked, light ladder at a new duty cycle, low for 3 seconds, high for 1, low for 3, so the recorder could keep its own metronome while the beacon kept its. Hover ready, Melina said, thumbing the thruster dial to the number we'd written last night. PWM 185, fixed. Timer, I said. She lifted her wrist. I counted breaths. We brought the machine's nose a meter off the snow, just the sled, no ROV, but we kept the ritual, fixed output, fixed lamp ladder, fixed body quiet. I called the ticks in a whisper, so the brain would have to leave fear and count. Low, 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 high, low, 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 high. The beacon answered 4, 4, 4, and on each high in our ladder, the long beat arrived with better posture. The bearing bow sharpened to a full degree north on those highs. The GPS crumb step north thickened into 2 meters and then thinned on our lows. The echo delay didn't change a breath. Log it, Melina said, eyes on the Yagi. I logged it without writing the word flirt. Minute 4 of the hover brought the hiss pair, 2 neat pips at 2 hertz, as if to say we were on the right shelf. The wire song visited for 3 heartbeats, faint and honest, around 3 kHz. Ducting would build later. For now, the day only made a sketch. I closed my eyes one breath to listen with the bones and opened them before my ribs could add adjectives. Cut hover, I said. We have what we came for. We set the sled back on its knees and let the slope be a slope again. Rectangle to the creek seam, she asked. Rectangle to the seam, I said. Then window, then the ridge shoulder. Quiet slope gets our best feet. We rode the terrace with our heads disciplined, eyes on 3 anchors at a time, hands loose, engines quieter than our habits. The quiet slope did what quiet slopes do. It tried to turn every small drift into a word like yes. I put the probe down at every yes and made it read no, or maybe instead. Under one drift, the sugar thinned to a dangerous idea. We moved our line 3 meters leeward, bought 4 minutes, and paid with nothing, which is rare enough to write twice. At the seam, the air healed colder by 3 degrees. Night had left its last pockets in the ditch. The thermometer stung the glove when I shaded it and set it low. We dug the skis, set the tripod, pitched the Yagi, and opened the window on the second. SAR-1, window 10 at creek seam, I keyed. Beacon 7C2069, interval 4 dominant, occasional 3. Conducted controlled hover at saddle lip, results logged, will deliver on return. Copy SAR-1, the wool said. Report any voice intercepts, weather holds. We listened. For the first time all day the beacon slipped. 4, 4, 3, 4, 4. The bearing bowed only on the 4s, the crumbs stepped with it. The 3s drew a straight line. The hiss duet did not arrive. The wire song stayed away. The echo delay behaved like a rule. A phrase-shaped something laid itself in the air, then flattened, Ducting's early sketch. I wrote one neat rectangle and left it blank. We loaded back on the line and let the quiet slope teach us its grammar again. Tracks visited once where wind could not erase them, fresh enough to give the edges a small black ring. Ovals, long, pinched at the back. The stride did short, short, long, across a place with no visible reason, until I found the void under 15 centimeters. A buried willow crawling under the slope like a wire, air walking its length. Whoever set those prints saw with their feet, or let the hills see for them. The tailings still read wrong side twice. I put my glove into the print, and my fingers stinged faster than the air deserved. Temperature pocket again, a degree or two colder at the bottom. I wrote it. The quiet slope pretended not to care. Fuel math? Melina asked as we rejoined our offset. Honest, I said. Home with a pad we don't owe and a hover we bought cheap. I didn't say, if the day stays plain, because quiet slopes don't appreciate being told their job. We stepped toward the ridge shoulder, where yesterday the map had learned to move a hand's width. The light took on a brighter gray, the kind that hints at sun but never pays. I dialed my headlamp down, and we ran the PME ladder again for 100 meters. Low, 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 high, low, 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 high. Just enough to ask the recorder if the beacon still liked to answer on our highs. It did. The long beats stood straighter. The bow north sharped half a degree, then softened. I wrote, light ladder coupling persists in daylight, geometry stable. At the shoulder we cut engines and let the place be itself. The echo delay shaved off its coat, summer version again. The wind wrote an honest sentence along the ridge and refused to count for us. The beacon kept 4 and minded its posture. I set a marker ribbon on the lee edge and took 2 steps to the windward to feel the slab's mood. No whump, no mutter, but the sugar below had not considered becoming disciplined. I sketched a rectangle. Avoid convexity, return via seam. Window in 12, Melina said. We do the last at the star, I said. Then we go home and make the map confess. We retraced the offset, bamboo line to our left like a straight thought in a stubborn paragraph. I kept an eye on each wand as if the day could move them when we weren't looking. The recorder would tell us later if our straightness stayed straight. The quiet slope offered 2 yeses and a maybe. We made them no's and kept our afternoon. At the large star, we dug the skis to their knees again and staged the tripod with the economy of repetition. Plate, guy line, pitch, gain. I keyed on the mark. Dispatch, SAR-1, final window 10 for the morning, at large star, beacon 7C2070, interval 4 dominant. No voice intercepts, returning per plan. Copy SAR-1, Wool voice said. Civilian caller from West Road reports hearing intermittent engine this morning near Ridge 2. Could be ducting, no crews active. Copy, I said. The map in my head placed the caller under our shelf. The math said sound shelf might be high enough to carry morning too. We listened one last time. The hiss duet clicked twice, honest and small. The wire song made a single wing beat. The beacon kept 4 like a patient light. We stowed the rig, smoothed the snow where we'd made our holes, and turned the machines along the path we'd promised ourselves. The quiet slope held its breath until we were 20 meters past its worst idea. then let the wind sketch words across our old tracks as if it had decided they were its own. On the logging track, the world remembered a road. Thermals started to stack in shy shelves. The echo delay put its coat back on a little. The beacon stayed 4. The GPS crumb kept its north step only on the long beats, even on the straight. I accepted its courtesy and saved my theories for the stove. Back in the yard, we killed engines and let the shed hold us. Helmets over grates, gloves on the cord. I laid the copy card on the table like a small animal and pulled up the recorder's blind pass. Mist blinks made their little gardens again, clustered more along the star and the lip. The light ladder showed the same impolite coupling. On our highs, the beacon stood straighter, the bearing bowed a hair more. The bamboo line, 15 meters of ordinary, built on the GPS as a taut pale stripe. On the long beats of 4, it shifted north by a meter on the screen, then returned on the 3s. On paper, my pencil line stayed straight. Quiet slope, Melina said, as if naming a person in the room. Plain, but most of the oddities sit on it. Because it doesn't brag, I said. We hear more when the hill stops telling us what to fear. We wrote the noon log, hover conducted, coupling persistent, shelf confirmed at lip, hiss pairs present, wire song minor, track maker competent, temperature pockets at print bottoms, no subject located. We drew another band on the map, shading lightly where the wind had peeled smoke yesterday and where the hiss pairs and bows liked to gather. It looked like a soft river across the shoulder, a place the air had decided to teach us a number. Wind that counts. Afternoon? She asked. We sit on the stove and make the recorder confess, I said. If the beacon stays polite, we plan a dusk rectangle only if the shelf keeps low. If it lifts, we let it and go to sleep. She nodded, already making grid lines on a fresh acetate. The shed made its wood smell, and the heater coughed in cadence. The anemometer ticked when the wind remembered. The beacon tapped 4 like a metronome that had decided to teach. I turned the sat phone over in my hands. Warmth read honest. No hum. I set it face down and let it be a tool again. Outside, the quiet slope stood where we left it, writing nothing dramatic, solving a small problem in air for anyone willing to count. By early afternoon, the beacon behaved like a student who'd memorized the answers. 4-second discipline, neat bearing bows on the longs, straight manners on the 3s. We let the stove turn snow into air and made the recorder confess the same couplings we'd seen outside. Our light ladder still taught the long beats to stand straighter. The GPS crumb still did its gentleman's north step in time. The hiss pairs still preferred the band along the saddle and the larch star. We marked a dusk rectangle, short, cautious, offset south again, with one planned hover at the lip and a return along the creek seam before the shelves grew tall. Dusk gives us sound ducting, Melina said, pencil steady. If there's a voice in it, we need to be under the shelf, not above. Agreed, I said. We'll run minimum power, patient light. Flare only for wind tests or a signal we can't answer otherwise. We bring a bivy ready, not optimistic. And we kitted the sleds like we were inventing the job for the first time. Sat phone inside chest. Avalanche probe on left rail, pre-clicked to near assembled. Mylar bivy, half free of its pouch. Flare kit where my left hand finds it blind. Fuel would be honest. Belts would be cool. The air would do math. We would count without trying to name what we were counting. The yard anemometer began to dress the wind in evening. Tick, tick, then a longer rest, then tick, tick again. Near that little cadence the hiss pairs favored. The digital said only wind. We wrote the time and called dispatch with a plan that respected their orders and our stubbornness. SAR 1 redeploying for dusk rectangle, south offset. 2 personnel, 2 machines. 1 controlled hover, no heroics. Turn home at first shelf lift, I said. Copy SAR 1, the wool replied. 3rd civilian report of distant engine near Ridge 2. Likely ducting, no missing persons filed. Beacon 7C2 still active. Report voices immediately. We left the yard with the quiet that befits evening. The logging track remembered us. Thermals began to stack in careful shelves. The echo delay thickened a winter coat again and sat a half-second behind, faithful. Patient light, lamps pulsing low in our PM ladder, kept the world from turning white into a lie. At the larch star, we dug the skis and opened the first window on the dot. SAR 1, window 10, Beacon 7C2071, interval 4 dominant, I keyed. We listened. The hiss duet arrived at minute 3, gentle and exact. The wire song walked, under 3 kits for 3 breaths. A syllable shape pressed a corner to the air and flattened. The bearing's bow, north, sat at a full degree on our highs, then softened on lows. The bamboo line we'd set in the morning held straight to the eye. The recorder would tell us later whether the crumb honored it. We ran the offset leg in short, exact hops, writing our own tidy version of dusk. At the saddle lip, we staged the tripod, guide it, pitched the Yagi, and set the hover. Thruster PBM held, lamp ladder at our low, 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 high cadence. "Hover ready," Melina said. "Window opens now," I said. "We hover only if the slab is in a listening mood." I probed the terrace with the pole. Chalk, thin slab, sugar, no mutter, no complaint. We brought Bear's nose a meter off the snow and counted in the quiet voice dusk deserves. The long beats on the beacon rose to meet our highs, neat and more sure of themselves. The bow, north, sharpened. The GPS crumb stepped its 2 meters like it had been invited. The echo delay stayed loyal. Hiss pair at minute 2, wire song at 3. A phrase-shaped thing laid across the band, and almost made a letter before thinking better. "Cut hover," I said. "That's enough coupling for one evening." We turned along the rectangle, noses pointed at the creek seam, pace trimmed to the kind the hill respects. On the quiet slope dusk writes its smallest arguments. Spindrift moving both ways for a breath before choosing. A surface that feels colder than the air by a mean that makes fingers sting sooner than the thermometer gives permission. The ovals we had been following all day visited once, fresh enough to take a neat edge. Short, long across a drift that hit a hollow 15 centimeters down. Tailings wrong side where the wind should have had its say. I put my glove into one and felt the bottom colder by a degree that mattered. Whoever made those steps would know where the snow ended before it looked like it did. At the seam, the air cooled another 2 degrees. The shelves built bolder, and sound began to move along them like water in a sluice. We cut engines and let the place settle. The echo delay wore the thickest coat I'd heard this season. The hiss duet came twice at the minute marks, exact like someone tapping a table. Far downstream, ducted on a shelf, an engine note laid itself under the night and held steady for 10 seconds before losing interest. Could have been us in shallow rewind. Could have been a truth with no requirement to be useful. "Window," Melina said when the second hand met the promise we'd made. I keyed the mic. "SAR1, window 10 at Creek Seam," I said. "Beacon 7C2072, interval 4, strength 2 bars steady, no voice intercepts." We listened. The bearing made its polite bows on the longs. On a single 3 it held still like a correction at school. Then, new, our receiver showed a whisper of another cadence under the beacon's floor. One short, one long, one short, repeated twice. A stuttering kind of punctuation, like a cold hand trying to key a mic without quite pushing. I didn't transmit. I put a rectangle on the page and left it blank. Melina underlined the minute and didn't look at me. "Rectangle corner," I said. "Then home on the seam." We moved, patient. The shelves grew taller. The wire song visited and stayed for 5 beats, riding the night like the wind had tuned a wire I couldn't point to. Ahead, at the bend where the seam turned under a willow mat, the beacon's strength climbed a bar and stayed there, as if we were walking toward an idea. The bearing didn't change more than it should. The timing held 4. Our lamps, still on their low pulse, made the willow fringe and the snow's small glass grains speak in honest detail. I called a halt at the bend. "Probe," I said. Melina already had hers out. We worked opposite sides of the seam, reading the snow the way you read a person learning what you mean to say. Chalk, thin slab, sugar, then, under the willow, a soft, then hard, then hollow, like a violin with one string slack and one tuned. I widened the hole with the saw and eased a gloved hand in. Fabric, not snow, thin and crinkled, mylar. The corner of a bivy showed itself with a little unwilling shine. We froze and made the scene small with our bodies. You don't yank, you don't guess, you inventory. I brushed snow away with the flat of the glove, revealed a coil of accessory cord tied to the mylar's corner, then a knot that had been made with sleeves on, sloppy but firm. I felt along the cord and found a plastic lump the size of a deck of cards, wrapped in tape against the mylar. A beacon could be that. A sat tracker could be that. A wallet could be that. I told my brain to wait for nouns until my hand had earned them. "Bivy," I said. "Cord. Package taped." My fingers found another plane under the mylar. stiff fabric and the square honesty of a foam pad folded small. A human-sized weight? The snow tried to erase my logic as fast as I wrote it. I scratched a channel wide enough to see gleam not of ice, but of man-made, then stopped, because the slab above us had adopted a listening posture I didn't like. Extraction? Melina asked. The word had cost in it. Only what we can take without the hill writing the ending, I said. We don't dig a room. We take the package, mark the site, and test for any reply. We split the job. She set the tripod with the Yagi pitched at the bearing's truth and opened the window without my saying. I braced the slab edge with the shovel and tugged the cord until the tape-wrapped lump cleared the lip. It came with the resistance of cold adhesive and lay in my palm with the cold honesty of a battery sled. I scraped snow with the knife tip, a Satphone battery sled, the make we'd issued to logging crews last winter, wrapped with the kind of impatience cold hands give you. The cord led farther under the mylar. I let it lie. Say R1, Melina keyed, voice level. We have a package at the seam, likely battery sled taped to mylar, beacon 7C2 strength up 1 bar, bearing steady. Request permission to extract package and mark site for day team. Dispatch took a breath I could hear through wool. Permission granted, the voice said. No heroics. If any weight is attached, do not pull. Mark and return. Copy, she said. We're good at obeying when the order is the one we wrote to ourselves last night. I took the sled free with a slow patience that felt like it had been practiced for weeks. When the tape let go, the beacon's strength dropped a bar, then recovered to the old level as if it had found another path to a sky it preferred. The hiss duet walked past on the minute. The wire song folded itself up and stopped. Under my glove, the mylar lay flat. No pushback, no breath, no heat that gloves love to steal. The foam plane did not move. We put the battery sled in a dry bag, tied a ribbon at the lip, logged coordinates with more decimals than the map would ever demand, and set 2 bamboo wands and a cross on the lee edge where the wind would be forced to think before it erased them. The avalanche probe went in as a mast, 1 section only, so the hill could keep the rest. Window closed, Melina said. The shelves had lifted enough to make the echo delay feel closer without changing time. The wind's voice learned a minor key. Turn, I said. Now. We backed out of the seam the way divers leave a room they don't own. The slab gave us the favor of silence. We eased the machine's nose onto the rectangle and let dusk become the kind of night you write about neatly afterward if you earn it. The beacon stayed 4, patient, like the light in a window that teaches you where home is by refusing to go out. Halfway to the star, the shelves climbed more steps. Ducted, far behind us, an engine note tried on our cadence and failed to match. Our own echoes dragged heavier coats and followed like polite dogs who'd learned our names. The GPS crumb did its north step with the long beats even on straight road. The compass held south, where south belonged. At the larch star, we opened one last window for the book. Dispatch, SAR-1, dusk rectangle complete. Package recovered from seam, battery sled taped to mylar, site marked for day team, no mass extraction attempted. Beacon remains active, no voice intercepts, returning per plan. Copy, the wool said. Weather line advancing, yard heaters on, bring yourselves home. Fox developed a small belt squeal a kilometer from the track, an honest complaint that asked for gentler throttle. We answered by sharing weight, my tool roll on Melina's sled, her Yagi on mine. The squeal forgave us. At the bridge the air pooled dark. We crossed by smell, patient light, and the dry sweet of timbers. At the angle iron spur the reflector's rhyme glowed again and did not pretend to be anything braver. The yard welcomed us with a cough from the heater that stayed where heaters live. Inside, we laid the dry bag on the table and didn't open it. We wrote first. Time, place, wind, shelves, echo delay, hiss pairs, wire song, strength change, battery sled. We logged the bamboo cross and the single probe section left as marker, and the promise to return with a day team who would choose nouns carefully. Only then did I cut the tape. A Satphone battery sled wrapped in our own winter issue, cereal from last year's lot, a corner rubbed smooth by fabric, no name. Someone had taped heat to signal and put both where the shelves could carry them. The mylar was a room without a person to warm it. The beacon tapped 4, 4, 4 outside the way, a patient light does when it refuses to be the hero. Melina pulled the mylar bivy from her thigh pocket and laid it across the bench like a flag that meant, try again tomorrow. I put my palm on our sat phone through my jacket. Warmth, honest, no tremor, tool, not character. I set the flare kit within my left hand's understanding and let the day sit. Cost? She asked after we'd made silence earn its keep. Fuel we can replace, so I say busy sigma bin seas, I said. A probe section we can miss for a night, a decision we'll defend in a warm room, and a hill that asked us to count its wind before it let us leave. She nodded, then wrote the last line of the day in a neat pencil. Extraction at dusk, battery sled only. Site marked, entity unnamed. She underlined without flourish. Outside, the shelves breathed up the valley toward the saddle, and the anemometer ticked twice and remembered to be wind. The beacon stayed a metronome in the dark. We closed the shed door, not to shut it out, but to let it count without us for a handful of hours. Morning made the yard a clean ledger. We brought the dry bag, the copied logs, and the map with shaded bands into the big room where the stove sulked and the repeater's wool voice made grown people sound polite. I laid the sat phone battery sled on a towel so the melt wouldn't make it a character again. Melina pinned our acetate over the topo and squared the corners with tape. The anemometer outside ticked its small spoon against the stop. Tick, tick, then remembered to be ordinary wind. Walk it, the supervisor said, pencil ready. He'd driven in at dawn, glassed with frost up to his bumper. I walked it like a rut. 2 personnel, 2 machines, midwinter rectangle south offset, windows on the 10s, echo delay half second, heavier at night, beacon 7C2 4 dominant, occasional 3s, bearing bows north on longs, GPS crumb steps north a meter or 2 during the same, hiss pairs near 2 hertz, wire song around 3 kilohertz on shelves, temperature pockets colder at track bottoms, visuals, ridge optical shift twice by a hand's width, no subject located. At creek seam, mylar bivy, accessory cord, this battery sled taped to the corner. No mass extraction attempted. Site marked with bamboo cross and 1 probe section as masked. Return without incident. Melina followed with her column work, neat and shy of adjectives. Coupling between our lamp ladder and the beacon's long beats persistent, stronger on high. Controlled hover at saddle lip. Thrusters fixed, PWM 185. Lamp cadence, low, 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 high. Longs straighten, bow sharpens half to 1 degree, crumb steps 2 meters. Fly tests, smoke peeled 5 seconds towards saddle on 2 occasions, stronger at dusk. Shelf band along saddle into larch star. Tracks, ovals, long, pinched, short, short, long, over hollows. Tailings wrong side twice. Bottoms read colder than air. No voice intercepts. 2 phrase-shaped airborne events, likely ducting. He tapped the battery sled. Serial's ours, he said. Issued last winter to logging crews in Sector West. No registered loss. Not an ELT. Could drive a portable. Could heat the inside of a mylar room, I said. Could, he said, not giving me the comfort of a theory. I opened the receiver and rolled our windows blind first, numbers second, the way we had made ourselves do it aboard a dull ship on a patient sea. Mist blink gardens under dusk. Hiss pairs on the shelf minutes. Wire song like fence wire taught to sing. Long beat bows stacked under our light ladder's highs. Crumbs gentleman north step exactly there. I slid the acetate band over the map so the dots, hiss, wire, bows, shelf, settled into a soft river across the shoulder. Wind that counts, I said, before I could stop the mouth from being poetic in a room that didn't need it. Air that carries, Melina corrected softly. Her pencil drew a rectangle over the seam where we'd found the mylar. She labeled it site, then added our bamboo cross like a plus sign someone might later erase by mistake. The supervisor looked at our hands, then our faces. Orders stayed orders, he asked. We obeyed their shape, I said. We said no to the heroics we wanted to want. He wrote, no unsanctioned pursuit. His pencil didn't press hard enough to show on the table through the paper. That felt like mercy. Dispatch came up on the wool, asking if the battery sled could have been planted to build false comfort. I put my glove on the bench to stop my fingers from wanting to answer as a person instead of a lead. We can't wait intent, I said. We can wait observable, sled taped to mylar corner with cold hands, not sloppy but firm, foam pad present under the sheet. Beacon strength dropped 1 bar when we freed the sled, then returned to baseline. Timestamps here. I slid the log across. I smelled wool, old paper, and that clean coin cold that lives in rooms with honest stoves. "We send a day team?" the supervisor asked. "Hard freeze, shelves low, no weather line until afternoon." "Yes," I said, before the room could make it a kindness. "4 with probes and a split-board pair to stay out of the seam. No ROV, no digging beyond the mylar's footprint, unless the slab speaks in our language. We take a second cross and a flagging tape run for a perimeter. We log air temps at 10 centimeters and at surface in each track we see. We go slow." I wanted to be on that team, but I set my left palm flat on the table, fingers numb where the skin had argued with yesterday. The cost had names: fuel spent exact, a probe section left to the hill, a belt we'd asked to sing gentle for a kilometer, a tiny white line across my ring finger where the cold had kissed and would hold the peck through spring. Survival with a receipt. "You're ground," the supervisor said, reading the hand. "I want you here making the recorder talk, while the day team keeps nouns honest." Melina's eyebrow flicked, the smallest of nods. She'd go, and she'd tell the hill we'd come back with ankles quieter and eyes better fed. We briefed the day team with the precision we owed them. Creek seam at these coords, bamboo cross lee edge, 1 probe mast, mylar bivy corner to north-northwest. Accessory cord leads beneath. Do not pull beyond what the slab tolerates. Hiss pairs near the saddle and star, wire song on shelves, echo delay constant at half second. If the ridge appears to move in your eye, pin 3 anchors and forgive it. If you hear a word-shaped thing with no letters in air, write the time and don't turn your head. Wind may count. They left like crews do, efficient, not dramatic. Their snow machines wrote neat cursive into the yard and then made it vanish with throttle. The anemometer ticked them goodbye. The spoon kissed the stop twice in quick succession. I watched the door longer than I needed to watch a door. The beacon, patient, polite, kept 4 on the receiver tray we'd damped with a towel. I made the black box confess again. We moved from blind passes to overlays, light ladder highs to long beats, thruster pump to bearing bow, hydrophone hiss to shelf minutes. I built tiny plots on squared paper, old-fashioned, in a room that had laptops and a heater that could count. It helped, the pencil. It kept adjectives out of the data. I drank water I didn't want and wrote times I loved, because times obey you if you count them even when the world refuses. At mid-morning, the day team checked in, breath showing at the ends of their sentences. "Site as marked," their lead said. "Bivy corner exposed, no body heat signatures, no recent disturbance under slab beyond your trench. Recovered a second battery sled 5 meters down seam. Same issue, same wrapping. Found 3 ovals up seam, bottoms colder by 1 to 2 degrees. Short, long, where willow void's present, no mass. Leave markers?" I asked. "Cross and flagging set," she said. "Probe mats replaced with our spare so you can keep yours a set. We owe you a section." That was kindness, which in our book meant responsibility returned. "Any voice?" I asked because the room needed me to ask. Air carried a phrase-shaped thing at the minute mark. "Ducting likely," she said. "No local voice. Beacon stuck on 4. Bearing bows when we blinked our headlamps by accident. We stopped blinking." We stood with our mittened hands off the radio for a beat that let our ribs check the room again. I imagined the bamboo cross in the seam, patient, holding shape until the band of wind that has been teaching us numbers made a better student of it. I imagined the battery sled as a warm, honest thing, wrapped in impatience and taped to comfort where anyone could mistake it for help. I didn't imagine who had put it there, or when, or why. "Turn home," I said. "You bring yourselves and the nouns you wrote. We'll give them neat places to sit." They returned with the clean lines crews have when they've done exactly what they promised. We signed for the sled they had found and placed it beside the first on the towel. Serial cousin to ours. Old lot. Honest wear. No name. We wrote the report while the day still fit in it. The supervisor read over our shoulders, chewing a pencil into a familiar ruin. "Conclusion," he said, "because form asks for the thing we couldn't name." I put the safe words in the safe order. Subject not located. Evidence of intentional shelter preparation at seam. Mylar with pad. 2 independent heat sources taped. No mass. Persistent anomalies observed. Bearing bow. GPS north step on 4s. Hiss pairs at 2 Hz. Wire song. Back 3 Hz. Echo delay. 0.5 s. Anomalies strongest along layered flow band from saddle to larch star. Tracks indicate competent mover avoiding hollows, short long over voids. Pinched oval planform, no tailings consistent with standard snowshoes. Entity, if entity, unnamed. Melina added the costs. 1 probe section surrendered as mast, 1 belt inspected for glaze, minor frost nip to lead's ring finger, fuel at plan, no other injuries. She underlined minor, like a mother who could promised herself not to fuss. Dispatch called last with the kind of mercy that sounds like bureaucracy. Case remains open pending further evidence, the wool said. Stand down until weather changes or new information arrives. File all raw logs. Rest crew 12 hours. We signed our names where the page wanted them and folded the map so the bands and crosses would be the first thing a morning shift would see. I stowed the flare kit in my left thigh pocket because my hand knows where to find it, even in rooms with stoves. I slid the mylar bivy back into its pouch, left a corner peeking, an honest wink. Before we killed the receiver, I turned the gain low enough that sleeves sounded like paper again and let the world have its chance to speak. The beacon tapped 4 with the patience of a light left in a window for people who might not return tonight. The anemometer outside ticked twice, paused, ticked twice, then remembered not to count. I put my palm on the sat phone through my jacket and felt only the warmth of a tool. The ridge in my mind moved a hand's width and then was where it had always been. We stepped outside together. The yard held its frost. The air had that clean coin smell. The wind wrote even sentences along the shed. Out beyond the creek seam, a bamboo cross waited under a sky that turns all patient things into measurements. We left it to do its job without us for a while. We survived with our names spelled the way we brought them in. The hill took a probe section and a line from a finger and the easy part of a night's sleep. That's the rate. We paid it. And when I closed the door, the beacon kept counting, polite, exact, as if it could teach the weather to mean the same thing twice.